I'm excited to introduce you to Mr. Mike Oakes, Senior Pre-Sales Engineer at Atempo. Mike, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Mike. Thank you for being on. Take it away.
Okay, great. So, hey, thank you, and thanks for the team for inviting us here today. So, again, my name is Mike Oakes. I am a Senior Solutions Architect, SE with Atempo, and I've been in the compute and storage industry about 35 years now. And what I'd like to do today with the team here is do a brief introduction to Atempo and then followed by some of our migration and protection projects, sorry about that, for heterogeneous storage environments. So real quickly, who is Atempo? So Atempo, we bring to bear over 25 years of experience in the field of data protection and management. We have about 2,000 customers worldwide and well north of 200 employees now. And we enable organizations to preserve their data ecosystems, their data sets, doesn't matter location, that data set size, or that organization size. And we enable with our solutions customers to protect, store, move, and retrieve business assets wherever and whenever needed in a global organization. So real quickly, some of the challenges, right? So you're probably asking yourselves, why did I preface that slide about Atempo and the data points about us? And it's more coming to a few years back, right? We took a look at where the market was heading and what we believed the market was heading with the explosion of big data, or as we call it, the data tsunami. And what we saw was there was a movement or adoption of hybrid storages. And I'm not talking about someone, hey, I can go buy an NVMe or an SSD and throw it in my storage model. It's more of a hybrid architecture, right? Taking the best of the technologies, and a lot of time it's homogeneous appliances, right, that don't talk to each other, dissimilar, right, whether it be their operating systems, whether it be the platforms they're on, but putting those more in a hybrid architecture, right? So that architecture being able to meet that workflow of a global organization. And what we do is we're able to take not only just different storages, whether it's SSD, HD, HCI, some type of NAS, but from different vendors, as well as multiple file systems, because not every file system will talk, and NetApp doesn't talk to an Isilon, and Isilon doesn't talk to a Cumulo or the cloud sometimes efficiently. And what we do is we do it in block, not block level, but file level. So we're able to take those file systems, dissimilar file systems, and have them talk in this hybrid architecture. And that includes talking to cloud. Now, it may be going some type of on-prem to cloud, maybe reverse cloud, maybe pushing your data to the cloud, acting on it, and just pulling back the results to your on-prem storage maybe, as well as we offer with our protection services air-gapped storage. So you get your production separated from your actual archive or your data preservation assets. So this is what Atempo brings to bear, both with our migration services and our product and our data preservation services. So real quickly, what's encompassed within this we call Miria platform, and I call these the 4 pillars, so to speak. And the big one we're talking about today is we'll see at the 3 o'clock position here, it's Miria for migration. And this is more of a time-based service offering. So you basically can rent the servers, or I should say rent the software. I want to be clear about something. We provide a software appliance. We do not provide the hardware. Now you can use your own, you can repurpose VMs. We have solution guides and briefs and we help you with sizing the appropriate servers to use. And we're going to talk about those in a minute. But the Miria for migration, as I said, it's a time-based migration service and it's a license. So you get our services, and it's a capacity and how long you're going to need the software for. And then when it's done, you uninstall and the license expires. The other 3 that you see here, especially the ones at the 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock position, these are your preservation products underneath the portfolio. Miria for backup, Miria for archiving. If you remember the tried and true Atempo Digital Archive, same platform. Miria encompasses all of those platform pillars. And they are also licensed, but a little differently. Those are perpetual with support because that's ongoing data preservation, ongoing data protection. And then what you have at your 9 o'clock position is Miria for data moving. Now this is, you think migration and data moving is the same thing, and it is. But the difference here is with data moving, it's perpetual. You're keeping maybe 2 distant locations in sync, or your DR site somewhere is in sync, or you need to copy and move data to organizations around the world to be able to collaborate, which is key in today's worldwide marketplace. So these are, like I said, the 4 pillars: the Miria backup, Miria archiving, data moving, perpetual license, and then your Miria for migration, service-based with a fee. So real quickly, as I mentioned, we sell software, right? And there's really 2 key components of that software package. The first one being the Miria server, which you see here. It's kind of at your middle on the left-hand side here with another Miria server grayed on underneath. This is, for all intents and purposes, your traffic cop, as I call them. It basically will command all interfaces to the data movers themselves. It takes care of all web interfacing, collection of all logs, scheduling of all tasks, parallelization of tasks, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, as well as being holding the database, right? So a copy of everything that's been moved, where it's located, and you can search our database. You don't have to go on to the particular pieces of storage you're using or the cloud. You can search our database to find out where something's located, or just ask for it to be retrieved, and we'll automatically pull it back from that location where it's at. Now, underneath, you'll see a Miria server grayed out. You can also add a hot standby or a cold spare to this configuration and have HA availability built into the product. Now, we usually see some little disks off to the left. They are basically, this is where your database, and we do logs, so your logs are stored there as well. This is currently running on MaxDB, just if anybody was curious. Now in the middle, the data movers, and their name tells you everything they do. They facilitate all movement from point A to point B, some piece of storage to another piece of storage. And we're pretty open to whatever storages we can talk to. If there's a network connection, 99% of the time we're able to facilitate whether it be a backup, a move, an archive, or in this case, a data migration. And you'll notice in this instance here, there's a primary and a secondary location, as well as looks like 2 groups of data movers. You have data movers inside the primary location, and they could be Linux, they could be Windows, or they could be AIX. And these are, say, taking care of moving data around between A and B, and or maybe you're isolating because you have HR and finance, which you don't want anybody on the same data movers as those. So you can pull and isolate those off, right? And then as well as if we're talking to some endpoint or between data movers, you need to have some type of encryption. We can do SSL encryption to endpoints. We do encryption between our data movers should you need to place them in distant locations across the globe and have it go across the World Wide Web. We can encrypt on one side, transfer it to the other, decrypt as we receive it, and apply it down to that storage on the far side. And that's kind of what you're seeing in those data movers in the middle. Their job here is pushing data from primary to secondary. Now, we may be migrating from, some on-prem GPFS, Isilon, NetApp, something, to something else on the other side. Could be cloud. Maybe we're migrating to another type of clustered file system. Maybe we're going GPFS to Lustre. Or maybe we're going Lustre to a NAS. All of these are supported under the product spectrum. And then real quickly, just one other point I wanted to make here is pooling of the data movers. When you pool data movers, you're getting a better parallelization. We're going to talk about in that 1 second in the slide coming up. But also you're getting multi-threading, which is extremely important to get the fastest throughput possible while not impacting the user experience. And I'm going to say user experience quite a bit here because not impacting that user workload and user experience is critical in whether it be a migration, an archive, and a backup. And we have some tools that help to do that, and we'll talk about those shortly. So real quickly here, we saw 5 challenges when we took a look some years back at what was coming, right? That data tsunami I was talking about. And we saw 5 key challenges or requirements that needed to be in the product, right? And those challenges started out with a large data protection, right? And that large data protection, encompasses everything from, I need to have a DR in place, or I need to have a backup and archive, but ensuring those assets, because these digital assets, they're the lifeblood basically of any organization, right? So losing those is not acceptable. Now, how do you actually preserve those, right? With all of the new storage that are coming down the market, you see hybrid storage is listed here, but it could be any new storage medium now, maybe 5 or 6 years from now. Having a modular design that allows for encompassing of those new storages to be effectively used in a hybrid architecture was critical in the product's design. And then, of course, data availability, right? And that was something that comes from the migration, the copy, sync, and move, as well as preservation, because no matter where those assets are, being able to access them, being able to share them between distant teams, being able to pull them back or place them somewhere in the event of a disaster was critical, because keeping that organization's assets up and alive 24/7, 365 was a needed requirement inside the product. And of course, data migration, because you're coming off some legacy storages now. Maybe you're moving to some type of new AI appliance or smart reporting, or you're consolidating environments, taking a data center, shrinking its footprint, right? So I need to consolidate many devices into one, which we can do with this product. I can go many to one, one to one, one to many. Doesn't matter. We can actually facilitate that movement underneath the product set. And finally, the last key important thing we saw here was flexibility and scalability. The flexibility here to incorporate new storages, but also scalability. And you saw me mention earlier on, we had two core pieces, right? There was a server and a data mover. With this product, you could have one data movers or 100. From a scalability perspective, there's no cost, there's no limitation on the number of data movers that you can use. You can deploy them. You already have the software. It's just a matter of calling that into service underneath the Miria server. So real quickly here, I want to talk about migration because it's key today in today's global environment. And there's really 3 crucial steps. And the first one, of course, is preparation and planning. And the preparation and planning is the bedrock. It's the foundation. You get it right, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have a pretty seamless migration and a very happy user experience. Poor planning sometimes, or improper planning, will get you not so good of a user experience. And I don't just mean planning as far as, what's my data look like, right? Or how many files do I have? It's what is that data set's file size, right? How many directories? And this is a big one a lot of times people forget in migration. Understanding how many directories, because each directory has to be read, and when you migrate and written to that new piece of target storage, so all the permissions and the metadata have to be written to that new storage. Now, a couple of 100,000 is not a big deal, but in this multi-petabyte environment we see now, there's typically millions of directories, so not having an understanding of that structure can be detrimental to your migration, but also understanding end-to-end. What I mean by that is, what's my infrastructure? How saturated is it? When can I run? Can I actually migrate during the day? Can I migrate during the evening? What's my hours of opportunity here to do the work? Taking all of that information and then building a plan and applying it in the volume synchronization phase is basically taking, we'll say, 3 days worth of work and putting it into a nice, succinct volume synchronization plan, and you apply that plan. Now that plan starts out with a full sync of data, and then incrementals over maybe a couple of weeks, a couple of days, depending on the data set, but you're catching up to that daily change rate, but you're also seeing that daily change rate in reports. And this is important because you can actually see how many files, how many directories, how much data, how long it took to scan, and so forth. And at the end, when you go to build into your cutover phase, you can set those expectations with your end users, your corner office managers, to say, you know what, it took me on my last 7 scans, it was 27 minutes to scan, 30 minutes to move the data. It'll take me 2 hours to repoint to users. You take a 4-hour window on a Thursday night, everybody understands the outage window and expectations. You start, you finish on time, everyone's happy, user experience is uninterrupted, right? Very important, that user experience. So I talked about, different tools we had underneath the appliance to help that user experience, right? So one of them The first one here, we're talking about the data movement. There's parallelized tasks and multi-threading. And this comes into play because we do things a little different than most. And whether it's migration, archive, backup, a copy, sync, and move, we can take a single task and assign a set of threads underneath it. Maybe it's I want to add 8 threads to it or 10 threads to it. And I start scanning looking for data. And while I'm scanning, I can hit a criteria that says so many megabytes have been scanned or terabytes have been scanned, so many files and or files have been scanned, or so much time has passed or elapsed. Fire up a subtask. Continue scanning, but start moving data immediately. And we can keep doing that using up all the subthreads until we reach, say, those 8 threads we've assigned. And at which point we'll suspend scanning, transfer on 8 different threads. And oh, by the way, those threads can be parallelized across and multi-threaded across a pool of data movers. So if I have 4 data movers, I can put 2 threads on each data mover. Now I've got all my data movers in play, as well as all my threads blasting against that data set that needs to be moved. When a slot opens up, we'll suspend the, we'll actually take the suspension of the scan out, restart scanning again, at which point we hit another criteria, says I found another terabyte of data, suspend the scan and keep transferring. And we'll do this till all the data's moved. In conjunction with that, there's 2 other features you see here, snapshot and fast scan. And these come into play when we can talk to the native APIs on board some appliances. So that could be a NetApp, that could be an Isilon, maybe it's a file system like a Cumulo, like a GPFS or maybe Lustre. We'll take a snapshot, take a picture while we're doing the scan, validate it. The next time around we go to do an incremental, we'll take another snapshot, and with the fast scan, we'll compare them. We'll build a change list, a diff list, so to speak. And then we'll just act on that differential list, move that data, or by the way, if things were deleted on the source that need to be deleted on the target, we'll also take action on that and delete those. What does that mean for the users? Well, I'm not scanning their file system anymore, right? So there's no total tree walk happening there. But we can detect all changes and seamlessly push them to the target side with minimal impact to no impact on the source side. So how does that pan out in a real-world scenario? So in a migration scenario here, in step 1, you'll see a synchronization happening. Now, that has to be a full walk the first time, and the reason for that, if we're using FastScan, or even if we're not, is with FastScan, though, we have to validate that snapshot's good. Once we validate it, we mark it as a valid snapshot, and then we use it on the next step. And that means we move into step 2, we schedule things to start running maybe every 2 a.m., on a Thursday or every day that week, and we'll start to move that data set that's changed. What we'll do is we'll take a second snapshot, compare it to the first. After it's validated, build the change list, move the data, delete the old snapshot so we're not using up excess space on the source storage, and move on to like steps 2, 3, and 4. And we'll keep repeating this over time as we're moving that change rate per day or change rate between migration cycles, until you get, of course, to step 6. What you do here in step 6 is you set up and understand now your cutover time because you've been looking at the reports, you know how long things are going to run. You get to your window, you put your source storage in read-only mode, do that final cutover sync. Could take a couple of minutes, depending on how large the storage is. Then go ahead, move your users, test, start production up, and now your users have moved, and you had little to no impact on that user experience I was talking about before. So real quickly, this is just looking at more about migration. This one here more highlights when you have a generic NAS, we'll say, these Dells off to the left migrating to some type of NAS storage to the right. One quick thing I want to note here, whether it's in a migration for a NAS, if you're using SMB shares, then you're going to be using Windows data movers. And that's to preserve those ACLs, permission, metadata information that's inside that particular share type. If you're using NFS, then you do Linux. Now, you can mix and match data movers underneath the same server. That's not a problem. You just pool them differently, and they'll each talk to those particular type of share that they've been assigned to. What you can see here is we have like a 400 terabyte file system, 180 million files. We ran at night with an 8-hour incremental window. Scheduled cutover, you can do per share. You can do every share at once. You can do subgroups of shares, directories under shares. You can get pretty granular on how you migrate this data. We already talked about multi-threading and parallelization, as well as in a pooled scenario, you can load balance. So we're load balancing across data movers, but as well as should one fail, that job will just be picked up from another data mover or the next incremental run. All data that's been processed is already safe and on the other side. We'll just pick up where it left off. Move files while scanning and parallelization, of course, we talked about bandwidth control, limiting the threads, very easy to do. You can change them on the fly and they'll pick up on the next iteration. Of course, the ACL preservation, depending on the type of data movers and shares you're using. One important thing you'll see here is the data integrity check. This is basically, we do an XX hash 64 on every read. And then just before we commit that write to the target side, we're going to do another XX hash 64, another compute. We're going to compare. If they match, that's great, we'll apply. If they don't, we throw it off the stack. We don't care why. We're not going to actually commit that write. We'll pick it up on the next incremental run and try again, and we'll flag it in the logs if there was an issue. So real quickly, I just want to show you this, and it's just a GUI here. It is an HTTP REST GUI. We're moving all of our GUIs from a thin, thick client to a web-based GUI. The first one here is Miria for migration. Archive and backup are coming later this year. And this is a global view for migration because most people want to know in a day how much I transferred or how many objects I moved. An object just being a file or whatever it happens to be that we're moving. You notice here there's multiple projects. This is a global view, but you can have tasks under these projects. You can drill in and look at a specific task, how it performed, its logs, and so forth. So all that information is now available, and you can pull it from anywhere in the world as long as you have a network connection. And then real quickly, why Atempo? And a lot of people ask this, but so if you've ever had a chance to read Storage Newsletter, recently they recognized Atempo as one of the only companies that can encompass or take care of 60% of storage vendor migrations today. And that's really because we can take care of whatever file system typically we're talking to. It's a block, not a block, an object. As I said, we are file-based, not block-based. But we can do object-based, we can do file system-based, NAS, doesn't matter. As long as we have a network connection to it or some type of connection medium, 99.9% of the time, we can talk to it. We can facilitate a move or data preservation. And one other thing I wanted to mention, because price is always a value, right? And in most cases, people do migrations, they price them in a terabyte range. And an average, from most people, 30 to 45K to do, a 50 terabyte migration. Now, if you start to extrapolate that out, you're talking about a petabyte cost could be upwards of $500,000 to $600,000. But whereas Miria in the same scenario can be over 50% less expensive, and in most cases we're going to provide a greatly reduced migration and cutover times. And what that means is that user experience I was talking about is not impacted, or very, very low impact that user experience, which is important because at the end, never impacting the users and preserving that data are two of the most critical functions you can do in data preservation and migration. With that, I know there was a lot of information in a short amount of time. I want to thank everybody again, and I'll turn it back over to David and the team for any questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, great presentation, Mike. Really cool stuff that you guys are doing there at Atempo. We do have some questions coming in for you from the audience. While we do those questions or answer those questions, I'm just going to bring up the first of two polls, and I want to call everyone's attention to this. On the screen, it says, do you have a storage migration or consolidation requirement or project coming up in the next 12 months? Simple yes or no question there. So Mike, let's see. First question that came in, I want to ask you about, and feel free if you see any questions in there that you want to cover, feel free to interrupt or jump in. First one here, they're asking, can Miria keep the similar file system architectures or appliances in sync for disaster recovery?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of those key requirements we saw, right? So being able to do a hybrid architecture. So NetApp to an Isilon, NetApp to cloud, cloud to GPFS, it doesn't matter. We can basically turn any environment into a heterogeneous workflow.
Nice. Nice. That's really cool for DR. Next question they're asking here, can Miria support private and public clouds?
Absolutely. So you can do on-prem cloud if you want it for your own private. at the same time selecting certain data to go to a public cloud, an S3 or a Google or an Azure. Choice is yours. You can assign different, what we call hashes to them and underneath the different storage containers, and they can be completely different on every site, and you choose what data goes where.
Okay, nice. And then next question, besides the GUI interface, what other methods are there to communicate and configure Miria?
So there's a couple. I mean, there's the GUI, which most people use, especially for migration, but there's a CLI. There's also a web API, as well as we do have a C++ API. The last one, of course, requires an NDA, but all the others are freely publicly available.
Okay, nice. And then thank you, everyone in the audience who answered that poll. I've just brought up a second poll. The question is, what additional information would you like about the Atempo solution? And let's see, we've got some more questions coming in, so keep your questions coming. Next one on the list here that I see in the queue is, what about for multiple sites? Do we need one Miria server per site, or what's the architecture?
So no, you could if you wanted to, but it's usually one Miria server controls multiple sites anywhere in the world, as long as there's a network connection. A lot of times people put data movers in each of those sites because of some type of encryption they want around the world, but one server can control multiple data movers at multiple sites.
Nice, nice. What about data encryption? Is that possible with Miria?
It is. So we can encrypt data mover to data mover. We can also encrypt to endpoints that support it. So I'll use Amazon S3 as an example. You're going to go, HTTPS. Well, we can do SSL encryption between your site and up to Amazon. Or if you're using local object or some storage on site that uses local endpoint encryption with SSL, we can do that as well.
Okay, excellent. And then another question, I guess we'll wrap up with this, and that is, how should people get started? What's the easiest way? I mean, you said this is software, so how should people give this a try for themselves, or what's the next step?
So, I mean, the next step, of course, is you can get to Atempo's website, www.atempo.com. There's plenty of information on there, but more importantly, if you want to talk to one of our storage experts like myself or others on the team, we can do a demo for you, as well as you can actually do POCs and demos yourself. It comes with a 15-day temp license that you can use the software to try it. Of course, it's not for production. You use it for demonstration purposes, but it gives you the full suite to test at your leisure in those 15 days. Nice.
Nice. I like that. All right. Well, Mike, I've put a number of more maybe technical questions there for you in the queue. If you don't mind checking those out, I'm sure the audience would appreciate it. Really great presentation. Thank you so much for being on.
All right. Thank you, guys, and thanks, everyone. Have a great day.